Hello, true believers. This is Doc Hogg, and welcome to episode 128 of Comics and Variety. If you like this channel, please do subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified when I post new videos, and for the sake of YouTube's search algorithm, please do hit the like button. My comic book Tilt finished its campaign early Thursday morning, and it is now in demand. I've set up a stretch goal at $4,000, and I'm only $121 from getting there. If I get there, everyone gets these two pinups. So if you haven't backed Tilt yet, you still can, and you should do so soon. So let's make these great pinups happen. I also want to mention a few comics and indeed one novel with a visual companion that I have backed and talked about on this show previously. They are Grim Reaper 2, Sunsworn Edge of Annihilation, and Peregrine, Wings of the Falcon. And they all have one thing in common. They have reached their funding goals. Peregrine is brought to you by the gang at Graded Point 5, and they call it a reconstruction project. That is that most superheroes these days, especially those in mainstream comics, are deconstructed to the point that they are no longer heroic. Well, Peregrine seeks to put the heroism back in superheroes. Grim Reaper 2 was created by the husband-wife team of John Gallagher and Carla Tornielli. It is a very original take on the Grim Reaper, giving him a personality, some troublemaking kids, and so forth. Issue 1 was great, and I can't wait to see Issue 2. Finally, there is Sunsworn Edge of Annihilation, created by Red Gaze, that is gaze as in a view, not as in communist homosexuals. This is a science fiction novel with a visual companion drawn by some of the best artists in Comicsgate. There are 3 preview chapters at its Indiegogo campaign page, so check it out and back these other 2 projects as well. The links to them are in the description below. Now, is Comicsgate a conservative movement? Deadwood Dale talked about this in a video the other day, and here is what he said.
I think the important thing to point out here is that the internet has hosted many countercultural moments, and there were many motives behind the Comicsgate countercultural movement. Many people had their own views on what it should be, so if you go back and you listen to your boy Zach, if you go back and listen to Ethan Van Sciver, there's, yes, an admitted conservative leaning. However, they're on record multiple times saying how cringy it is to force-feed your politics through your writing, through your art. It's not because you have a bias against certain politics, it's that you recognize how uncomfortable that is for your fans. If you wanted Comicsgate to be more of a conservative movement, you were going to need a group consensus about that. Unfortunately, with Comicsgate, you're not going to get a group consensus because that's fundamentally what the movement is about. It's about the books, it's about the individual freedom to write and create as you see fit. And addressing the second part here, because they were blacklisted, now I don't think because you were blacklisted for being a certain thing means that your movement has to be all about that certain thing. It's called Comicsgate, it's not called Conservative Gate. Clearly their passion overrules their beliefs. Otherwise, why would you be doing Comicsgate? Just get into political talk. All you would really have to do is just use your large YouTube channel to talk about Donald Trump all day. So I did respond here. This is something I say all the time. It is conservative by circumstance, not by design. And what I mean by that is that the current political environment in pop culture, that shouldn't really even be there. This could also happen to other people with different political beliefs. Just because it happened to mainly conservatives doesn't mean that it's okay if it happened to mostly liberal-leaning people. It's the whole idea of not being able to have a career, having a livelihood, because we found out that you liked Sean Hannity post or something like that. So because of your beliefs, we're going to shut down your whole career, your ability to provide for your family. We're going to take what is already pretty a volatile career choice. Comic books haven't been doing well for a while. We're going to take whatever little success you have with us, and we're going to just squash it. We're going to stifle it. It's that idea that really forced Comicsgate into existence. It wasn't because it's a conservative thing. We have a guy in Comicsgate called Commie Mark. I mean, we have a lot of different people here. We have people that don't like Trump and Comicsgate. We have people that love him. I mean, you're going to get a wide variety of people. Just because Ethan Van Sciver is one of the most vocal comic skaters and he's a Trump supporter doesn't mean that everybody's all excited about Trump.
Now, I agree with some of it and disagree with other parts of that. But ultimately, I think the answer to the question is Comicsgate, a conservative movement, is both yes and no. If you mean part of the conservative movement, that is it part of the loose coalition of groups that fight for lower taxes, less regulation, strong defense, right to life, etc.? No, Comicsgate is not part of that. And it can't be because there are quite a few people involved in Comicsgate who don't believe in those things. Indeed, you can be a liberal and a comic skater. Brian Kriskow, who created Six Gun Gorilla, he's one. Now, why is that? Well, look at the principles of Comicsgate. Treat the customer well, produce good stories and good art, and keep the politics out of comics. To believe in and practice those principles, you don't have to be in favor of low taxes or right to life or anything else we associate with the conservative movement. However, that does not mean that Comicsgate is not conservative in nature. Indeed, it is, and here's why. It has to do with the principle of keeping the politics out of comics. I actually think expressing it that way can be a bit misleading because it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't explore political themes in your comics. What it means is that you let the story and art drive your comics and not your political agenda. It's a sort of getting back to basics, and that is why Comicsgate is conservative in nature. Getting back to basics, getting the political agenda out of things has been a conservative position for decades. For example, many conservatives have pushed for getting religion and churches away from pushing political agendas and instead get back to teaching morality and saving souls, which is what churches are supposed to do. Most of the people who don't like the current pope because he pushes socialism and the climate change agenda are conservatives. Conservatives have also long pushed to get the political agenda out of the classroom. That is, education needs to teach kids reading, writing, and arithmetic and not try to indoctrinate them. And like I said before, Comicsgate is about getting comics back to basics, not letting political agendas drive the stories. That is a conservative position. If you were to go to CPAC, which is stands for the Conservative Political Action Conference, it's a massive conference of conservatives from all over that happens in D.C. every February, and you were to tell them about the principles of Comicsgate, most of the attendees would probably agree with them. By contrast, if you were to go to one of the big liberal get-togethers like Netroots Nation and ask them about Comicsgate principles, you'd find a lot of people there disagreeing with those principles. To them, of course the political agenda should drive comics, just like it should drive most things. Not all of them would say that, but a lot of them would, and way more than would say it at a gathering like CPAC. Now, was that by design? That is, did a group of early comic skaters say, hey, how can we design this so it fits into the conservative agenda? Of course not. It was a bunch of people who had been lifelong lovers of comics, and they saw what was wrong with present-day comic books, especially in the mainstream part of the comic book industry, and Comicsgate principles sort of grew out of that. Deadwood Dale is right on that. Comicsgate is incidentally conservative, not by design. And that leads me to my last point, that we should not be pushing Comicsgate into the conservative movement. If, say, a group like CPAC were to invite someone from Comicsgate to talk to them, fine, do it. But that's as far as it should go. And the reason for that is a tactical one. Comic books are an artistic industry. It's full of artists, and there are a lot of liberals among artists. And a lot of them agree with Comicsgate principles. And to get the comic book industry back to where it should be, making good comics, that's going to take a lot of people. It cannot be done with only conservative-leaning people. Again, going back to Brian Kriskow, do you really want to not have him involved in this effort? His comic book, Six Gun Gorilla, is what the comic book industry should be doing. Having him as part of Comicsgate is a net plus. Chase people like him away, and Comicsgate will forever be just a rump of the comic book industry. Alrighty, that's all for now. Until next time, have a very nice day.